In India, Dr. Gail, please let me know if this falls under the same bucket. Recently, we've had this big wave of stock market addiction where teenagers and young adults are putting money in futures and options on two or three taps of the mobile phone, which previously would have been difficult. You just have to download and you've got what we call the UPI, United Payments Interface. Automatically, the amount gets debited from your bank. You place a bet and there is a rush to know at the end of the day, do you make money? And that will be 4 times. If you lose the whole principal amount. What part of the brain, is that the prefrontal cortex that is responsible? It doesn't have the brakes then?
There are parallels between these kinds of addictions and other forms of addiction, including sex addiction, for example. So we know that there are circuits deep within the brain, circuits called the mesolimbic pathway, that is responsible for pleasure and reward. And that circuit is driven by a chemical called dopamine. Now, when that is repeatedly stimulated at very high levels, that can seek further risky behavior. And, a good parallel with that is, for example, the increase in sex addiction that has probably been driven by the ease of access of things like internet pornography. We live in a much more sexualized era at the moment. Previously, there were significant hurdles to this kind of behavior, but the more you stimulate the dopamine system, this mesolimbic circuit, the more you desire stimulation of that circuit. And it's that ease of access to these kinds of feedback mechanisms that give rise to the feeling of reward or pleasure that actually drive an exacerbation of these behaviors.
And can we do anything about it, or we are born with it?
Well, I think that there are certainly genetic aspects to this, in that we know that our genes influence a range of our behaviours, be it predisposition to addiction or a predisposition to anger, for example. There's very good evidence that depending on what genetic makeup we have will influence how angry and how violent we are likely to be. But some of it is, and perhaps this is why I am, although my book is, initially can be perceived as being a sort of rallying call against a moral viewpoint, a moral framework for our view of human behaviour. Actually, we know that our brains are mouldable, that they change all the time throughout our lives, and they are dramatically influenced by our environment. So by changing our environment, we can change the behaviour of society and also individuals. And I guess that, when you look at the parallels with sex addiction, for example, there are strong arguments for making these kinds of stimuli less accessible to particularly young individuals, although older individuals are also at risk of these kinds of problems.